Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. And many more, and many more, and many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles, and this is Thinking Thursday. This is our opportunity to share with you, ooh, to share with you some thought-provoking ideas to share with you centered around theology, faith, philosophy, and more. We are continuing our reading, and as I said on yesterday, we are going to be taking a bit of a break, about a week, so that we can handle some health and personal things on our end. But we'll be taking a break for about a week. We'll be back on the last week. We will be back on the last week in January. And the books that we are reading today will be picking up again on that Thursday in the last week of January. I want to say happy revolutionary birthday, heavenly birthday to MLK and all of you who share an official birthday with him, which is today. We know we're going into the MLK holiday as well. So I encourage you to do some act of service in your community, do some act of service for your fellow human being. Most people use today as sort of a community service day, some way to reach out in your community in some way, shape, or form. I encourage you to extend that over the weekend. If you join us usually on Sundays, we will not have our Sunday dialogue this weekend because we are encouraging you to get out in your community and do something specific on Sunday, on this weekend, to honor the legacy of Dr. King. All right, we are reading from The Spirit of Justice, True Stories of Faith, Race, and Resistance. I think it's very appropriate for the time in which we are living. And Reparations, a call, a Christian call for repentance and repair. People are often saying, where are the Christians? Where are the Christians? What is their message right now? Why are they, some of them, going along with some of the things that we see happening? And then where are the Christians that are calling for repentance, calling for repair, calling for us to not fall into tyranny, calling for us to take care of the orphan and the widow and the stranger? We're out here. It's just that the algorithms don't push that message. All right. So the way you can help us push the message is by sharing our broadcasts and sharing those broadcasts where you see people actually stand for the truth, right? Nobody will know it's happening if we don't publish it and share. It's that simple. People tend to accentuate the negative over the positive. Why do we know more about Drewski than we do about ministers and spiritual leaders who are doing things the right way, right? One of them has gotten what, 54 million views. You're the average person that is actually doing right and living right and honestly and righteously and serving people. Most of the time, they're not getting 54 million views. right? So the algorithm pushes certain things towards you. That's what you need to understand. And somebody asked the question of me yesterday. They were like, this person is playing with God. And I said, I don't necessarily think that they are being disrespectful of God. I think they are shining a light, right? And turning a mirror on people who utilize God as a means of dishonesty, as a means of manipulation. And I told them, I said, frankly, I'm a believer, right? I believe in Christ. I follow the spiritual teachings of Christ. And you know why I'm not offended? I'm not offended because I'm walking out my spiritual practice. That's why I'm not offended. If you're offended, I'm going to say, go look in the mirror, go examine what you are doing as a spiritual leader, and tighten up, adjust, make the necessary changes that you need to make. Um, and so we don't get bogged down in what somebody is sharing and exposing. That unfortunately is a reality when it comes to spiritual places, especially on the mega side. And I also told that person, I said, this is not just, he's emphasizing mega churches, but this is not just a mega church issue. There are spiritual leaders along the lines, whether you have 30 people in your congregation or whether you have 2,000 or more, which is what defines a mega church. There are people who utilize the gospel, who utilize God, who take advantage of people in the ways that he was showing in his satirical skit. And so that's something that people need to reckon with. So again, um, if that skit offended you, then that means go look in the mirror, go introspectively and say, am I doing any of the things that he pointed out? If you're not doing what he pointed out, why are you angry? Why are you upset? I don't think it makes God look bad. God is going to be who God is going to be. Um, Focus in on your spiritual practice. That's what I'm going to tell most people. Focus in on your spiritual practice. Think about it. What are you doing to bring honor to God's name? If you feel like that was over the top, that was rude, that was disrespectful, ask yourself, what are you doing to bring honor to your spiritual practice? That's it. All right. We're going to get into chapter 3, the language of liberty. The language of liberty. And it's going to be a short read today in this book, and then we're going to move to our next book called Reparations. Momentous historical events often turn on seemingly small decisions. As a case in point, consider how if just one paragraph in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence had remained, slavery might never have become an enduring institution in the United States to begin with. By 1776, European colonists in North America were ready to declare their independence from England. They turned to Thomas Jefferson to outline their reasons in writing. The document that Jefferson submitted to the Continental Congress that year included an indictment of the British king. Why? Because he approved of slavery. It said, he has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights to life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. So when people say things like the transatlantic slave trade never happened, right? I've heard that. I want them to go back to what Thomas Jefferson said. There was definitely a transatlantic slave trade going on. And if you don't want to believe the many documents and slave manifests and all of these other documents, if you just want to rely on the word of someone white, then go read what Thomas Jefferson wrote. He wouldn't be writing about an imaginary slave trade, okay, back in the 1700s. Then I want you to think about what he said there. Here's what he admitted. He said, "You're violating the sacred right of life and liberty of another person." He called those who were enslaved persons. Now, this would have been a no-no because in order to keep this institution rolling, we've got to not qualify their personhood. So Jefferson is doing some very interesting things in this original statement. Okay. Then he says, these were people who never offended anybody. How's that for a qualification of a people? They never offended anyone, but they were captivated or captive, held captive, and carried into enslavement. Think about that. In his earlier draft, Jefferson went on to call slavery an execrable commerce. Now, also keep in mind, he also owned people. So this whole notion that sometimes people will have or they'll bring up and they say, oh, they didn't really understand the evils of slavery. It was necessary for the times. I've heard those arguments. Jefferson himself went on to call it an execrable commerce and excoriated the quote unquote Christian king of Great Britain. So they knew this was against so-called Christian principles because he was calling the king of Great Britain out at the time for approving of such a heinous institution that he himself was operating in. Such a forceful takedown of slavery written in this soon to be historic document likely would have highlighted the contradiction between practicing human bondage while professing the ideals of liberty and justice for all. Jefferson's anti-slavery sentiment directly addressed the now perennial question of who the all in the all men are created equal refers to. These few words, just several dozen total, likely would have made the perpetuation of enslavement a more tenuous endeavor in the emerging United States. They might have even prevented the Civil War. Now, just think about that. Had they allowed that paragraph to enter into the constitutional document, it would have been hard to justify things like the 3/5 clause, right? It would have been hard to continue to say these people are not human and therefore we can treat them as property. Good morning to everyone coming in. But that didn't happen. Instead, delegates from the southern states threatened to hold the Declaration of Independence hostage unless Jefferson's anti-slavery message was removed. Additionally, his sentiments were disingenuous. The English were not unique in the human trafficking of Africans. Plenty of colonists participated in and benefited from the practice of enslavement. Even the primary author himself was enslaving hundreds of human beings who had enriched him and made his life comfortable. He also notoriously had an ongoing relation with an enslaved woman at the time, Sally Hemings, who birthed several of his children. So many people saw this paragraph that he was trying to put into the document as sort of hypocritical and grandstanding. Like, who are you to tell us about the horrors of enslavement when you yourself are participating in the same practice? In hindsight, it may seem as if the enslavement of Black people was inevitable, as if nothing could have prevented it from happening. But Black people who were increasingly victimized by hardening racial ideas and the enshrinement of race-based chattel slavery did not believe their case for freedom was hopeless. In fact, The same revolutionary ideals promoted by white colonial leaders were the very claims that emboldened Black people for emancipation. They too appealed to the language of liberty that suffused the era with the aroma of revolution. Amid an ossifying racial hierarchy, Black people spoke up and acted to resist their own dehumanization. In the American Revolution, they fought both for the colonists and for the British. Leading up to the conflict, Black people filed freedom suits in court and consistently referred to their Christian faith as an argument for their liberation. And some of them won that argument. So when we have people in my community that don't read enough, that go around talking about how enslaved persons just went along with the system, you're not reading enough. If you're saying that enslaved persons just simply believed that they were supposed to be enslaved and that they were taking on the master's religion rather than using the master's religion to file lawsuits for their own freedom and liberty, you're not reading enough. That's what I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to say that you're not studying. I'm going to say you're not reading enough. Because there were, in fact, people using Christianity to challenge their enslavement and to get free. In this chapter coming up, we will see how Christians helped forge a new nation and how the spirit of justice informed Black resistance to enslavement as the revolution approached. If you're wondering what book I just read from, it's entitled The Spirit of Justice, written by Black theologian Jemar Tisby. Jemar Tisby is a PhD from the University of Mississippi. He's the author of The Color of Compromise, another book we've read here before, How to Fight Racism. He is a historian who studies race, religion, and social movements. He also serves as a professor at Simmons College of Kentucky, a historically Black college. He also has a Substack as well. So if you want to follow his current teachings, he's currently teaching about white Christian nationalism. You can follow him on Substack. Just look for his name, Jemar Tisby. Tell him I sent you. All right. My next one here, Reparations. This is the second book that we are reading on Thursdays. Every day of the week, by the way, we are reading different books. So if you join us on Monday, we're not reading the same thing. You join us on Tuesday, Wednesday. We will not be here Friday, and we will not be here next week. We will return the last week in January. But this is our second book we're reading, Reparations, A Christian Call for Repentance and Repair. And I want to remind people that as we are reading through this book came out in 2021. This was one of the things that was, I feel, a response to George Floyd and the racial reckoning that was happening at the time. People were actually more aware and thinking about what it is that we need to do and what it is that we need to repair. That racial reckoning, right, is now being followed up by a white lash, right? Is now being followed up by a white lash. People who are saying, okay, we've had enough of this reckoning. We've had enough of people demanding that we repair things. We don't want to repair anything. We want to go back to 1619. I know people keep saying they want to go back to the 1960s. No, they don't. I know some people have said they want to go back to 1865. No, they don't. They want to go back to 1619. That's what they want to go back to. And it is up to us as an informed citizenry to resist that push backwards. Chapter 2, Seeing the Reality of White Pseudo-Supremacy. James Baldwin wrote this in Notes of a Native Son. The conundrum of color is the inheritance of every American, be he, she legally or actually Black or white. It is a fearful inheritance. for which untold multitudes long ago sold their birthright. The immeasurable distance. In the summer of 1852, Frederick Douglass felt lost. Just 5 years earlier, he had basked in the glow of a meteoric rise to international fame. During his year-long speaking tour of the UK, crowds gathered in churches in Scotland to hear him, pubs in Ireland, and lecture halls in London, straining against one another just for the opportunity to see him. They wept when he left the British Isles, pledging their personal loyalties and financial resources to Frederick's abolitionist cause. When he returned to America, a cheering crowd welcomed him home. He had accomplished what few men and virtually no African American men had accomplished. He had become an intellectual leader, a moral force, and a personal celebrity on both sides of the Atlantic. And he had done all of this before his 30th birthday. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but Frederick Douglass is one of the most photographed people in history, because at the time, photography was a very new technology, and he took the most use and advantage of it. He would have been our TikToker, right? He would have been the person that was using whatever social technology at the time that was new and on the scene. And so he is known to be one of the most photographed persons in history because he saw that new technology and he began to utilize it immediately and take advantage of it throughout his entire life, including the life of his family, his sons, etc. What a difference 5 years had made. As he looked at his life now, he found himself engulfed in attacks on his reputation, conflicts in his marriage, precarity in his finances, disputing with other abolitionists, and a national political crisis that would, he sensed, lead to civil war. In light of these things, it was a relief to be asked by the Ladies' Anti-Slavery Society of Rochester to be their honored speaker for their 4th of July address. Not only would it help to support him financially and promote his fledgling paper, it would also, in a sense, feel like old times. But these were new times too. No longer was he the novice speaker on the abolitionist circuit, an emerging leader testing out his ideas, engaging his audience. He had matured into a singular force, and he knew it. He gratefully accepted their offer to speak, but he did so on his own terms. Though the event was originally scheduled as part of the community's July 4th celebration, Douglass insisted on giving his address the following day, July 5th. In doing so, he identified not with white, but with Black Americans, who, in response to the tradition of holding slave auctions on July 4th, refused to celebrate that day. It was a sign of things to come. The talk was held in Rochester's newly opened Corinthian Hall. Graced with soaring ceilings and abundant light, it was the most prestigious venue in town for public events. As the hour drew near, nearly 600 people, the majority of them white, began to claim their seats. Though Douglass had fallen on hard times of late, he maintained his reputation as one of the finest orators in America and one of the most powerful spokesmen for abolition anywhere in the world. Even so, no one was quite prepared for what they were about to hear. As he often did, Douglass began his speech by humbling himself before his hearers. He told them, among other things, that he approached them with little experience and less learning, trusting to their patient and generous indulgence. At face value, Douglass's words were transparently false. He was a once-in-a-generation talent, a man of enormous charisma, learning, and experience. In these respects, not one person seated before him was actually his equal. But to take them at face value, to hear them merely as self-abnegating flattery offered in hopes of uniting his hearers to himself, is to miss the point. Douglass's words were rather an attempt to divide himself from his hearers. He sought to remind them of the profound distance between them and him, of the fact that his enormous gifts notwithstanding, he was still a Black man in America. As he puts it, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. This distance, rather than a mere differential formality, was to become the speech's central theme. But not yet. Moving from his introduction, Douglass seemed to settle firmly into his audience expectations, the glories of the 4th of July. He spoke of the day as the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. He described it as their Passover, a day that carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance. And not only this, he reminded them in terms verging on rhapsody that their deliverance was no mere act of providence, but the fruit of the bold work of their ancestors, who, out of a strong conviction of freedom and justice, lay deep the cornerstone of the national superstructure which has risen and still rises in glory around you. This was the Douglass that they had come to hear, the Douglass who saw the goodness of their cause, who honored the courage of their fathers, and embodied the promises of their nation. One can almost imagine the delighted rapture of the audience as they were hearing Douglass put these words out from this man, from this place, in this day. And yet, the perceptive listener could hear something else as well. Even as Douglass honored the founding of America, he distanced himself from it. He said, your independence, your freedom, your deliverance, your fathers, your nation. A hidden repudiation lurked beneath the surface of his words, and then it came. Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. Douglass laid bare what he had kept hidden in mind from the moment he received the invitation, what he had hinted at through his insistence on July 5th, his exaggerated words of deference, his uncomfortable use of the word your when speaking to his audience on American history. The America being celebrated on that day was their America, not his. It was an America enjoyed exclusively by white people at the expense of Douglass and the African Americans on whose behalf he spoke. Though they were abolitionists themselves, Douglass's audience, arrayed in their patriotic fineness, sat chastened before him. Douglass had called into question some of their most cherished beliefs, and he did not relent. In page after page, he declared their vision of a universally free America to be a soothing fiction, a fantasy, refuted by its continued approval of slavery. From his perspective, both the American nation and the church that solemnly blessed it showed themselves to be the enemy of the Constitution and Scripture rather than embodying their vision. He summed up his view of the July holiday and the nation that it honored in these famous words. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is a constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty and unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up the crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Now, I want you to think about that because we are in 2026 and literally at this very hour, there is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. I want you to ask yourself, why can we take Frederick Douglass's words from the 1700s and plug them into 2026 and they still ring true? Keith Porter, Renee Good. Shocking and bloody practices at this very hour. As a conclusion of his speech, the crowd, chastened, awed, thrilled, and inspired, rose in unison and celebrated Douglas's words with a universal burst of applause. Though they had not yet closed the immeasurable distance between themselves and Douglas, between whites and African Americans, they could perhaps for the first time truly see it. Whew. When we come back, we're going to talk about seeing America, seeing the modern invention of whiteness, seeing pseudo supremacy, and blackness that holds up a mirror. Ouch, ouch, ouch. If you can't say amen, just say ouch. Okay? I mean, as I was reading Douglas's words, I was thinking to myself, why does it sound like you could just get somebody to stand on a news station literally right now and read Douglas's words, and it would feel like they are talking about what is happening in our government right at this moment. It would feel like we were talking about the suppression of votes. It would feel like he was talking about what happened with ICE in Minnesota. That should concern us all. At what point are we going to be able to read some of these historical statements and we be able to put that mirror up and say, this isn't us anymore? We are doing better than we were before. We have a better handle on people's humanity, people's dignity. We are respecting one another as fellow human beings. Our goal in life isn't to see how much someone suffers, but to see how much care we can provide for that person. When is that going to be America's testimony? Because we are supposed to be a first world country, right? Other first world countries have figured this out. It's not like it's something that is not doable. Other countries have figured this out. Other countries have figured out how to get along with strangers that come into their country. Other countries have figured out how can we serve our citizenry and honor the fact that there are strangers amongst us. Other countries have figured this out. Other countries have figured out how to reduce violence through guns. Other countries have figured out how to provide universal health care. Other countries have figured out how to protect the rights of their citizens, regardless of their sexuality, their sexual orientation. Other countries have figured this out. The question is, do we, as we are nearing our 250-year birthday, do we as a country have the will to figure it out? And I feel like um, this will be a defining moment, that this year will be a defining moment for America, whether or not we will be able to move on as a nation, survive as a nation, or whether we will resign ourselves to deterioration and destruction and ultimately being folded into even another nation, because we can't really think that other nations are just going to let us continue to bully them, right? Without those nations forming an alliance to come against us, to take down our power in the free world that we keep trying to make unfree for everyone else. Make that make sense. How are we going to be leaders of the free world when we're trying to make the world unfree for everyone else? Somebody didn't think this through. Someone didn't think this through. All right. Um, Pastor Ben, are you still there? Let me read some of these comments before I share. We're gonna see if we can add you. I'm gonna send you the link. All right, link has been sent. Let me see comments here. Um, Thank you, Dolly. I think that's Dolly 345. Leslie says they want coercive control, but with an iPhone. Yeah. He wastes not one word. Absolutely. Frederick Douglass was a consummate orator. Like they said, he was one of the most sought out and greatest orators of his time. And read like you're doing now. Yes, it's totally doable if the will is there. Uh oh. Let me see if I can bring this closer. All right. Hopefully, you can hear me a little better. I am bringing this closer. Let me see if I can bring this up some. And we're adding in our person. All right. And hopefully, I'll be able to hear him. You just turned it up? Okay. All right. Can you all hear me? I am talking louder. So hopefully, you can hear my volume okay. Good morning. Good morning.
Good
All
morning.
right. I can hear you perfectly. Go ahead, Pastor. What would you like to touch on today? I know
Okay,
we
okay.
covered a couple things here.
I would like to touch on all of it, but it all culminates on what you ended with. America is trying to be great again for
Mm-hmm.
white men.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. America is trying to be great for white men and white men only.
Okay.
America is trying to take over other nations, forcing themselves on other nations, and just bullying other nations.
Mm-hmm.
There was somebody. I'm trying to think. There was some nations coming together to do exercise over in Greenland,
Okay.
militaries. Now, why are they choosing this time to do that? And Russia is involved.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they choosing this time to do that? Um, It appears that this was a strategic move
Hmm.
against our nation because they're basically coming up because Greenland invited them, and they're
Yeah.
coming. That this NATO is involved in this also, and
Yeah.
I believe that they're.
I was gonna
Go
give you
ahead.
the name of it. It says several NATO nations, including France, Germany, Sweden, and Norway, are deploying troops to Greenland for joint military exercises that are being called Operation Arctic Endurance
Hmm.
to boost the Arctic island security and escalate amid escalating U.S. interest in acquiring it. Following failed talks between U.S., Danish, and Greenland officials. These involve guarding their infrastructure, assisting their police, deploying fighter jets, and naval operations, signaling increased NATO presence in the region, much to the concern of the U.S. Well, we won't have those concerns if we would stop bullying people, right?
Right, right. So it's looking like somebody is finally going to stand up against them.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing: what NATO is doing right now, it's not going to stop them.
Yeah.
They're so lost. They see this as a non-threat. We're more powerful than anybody. And I remind people, it doesn't matter how powerful a military is. It's only as strong as its leadership. And right now, our leadership is trash. Bottom line, our leadership is trash. The head of the military is trash. Homeland Security is trash. That's the bottom line. There's no nice way to say it. We got so many unqualified people leading in areas that we need some of the top qualified people in.
Yeah,
That
I
weakens
mean,
our military.
I don't I don't hold a confidence in the people that are guiding us right now at all. Um,
Not at all.
People who don't understand basic security protocols,
Hmm.
people who are leaving communications open to anyone being able to break into your communications,
Hmm.
people holding highly classified conversations on unsecured means, people holding conversations on phones that are not actually properly secured, or they're holding these conversations on the wrong devices. Like, because I live in the region, I know a little bit more about sort of the protocols and security and stuff that they're supposed to be operating in, and it's just not happening. It's not happening. I knew some agents, and I remember them having to go for like security clearances and checkups and things of that nature. Like every 30 days, they had to like go check in. They had to do questionings. Their backgrounds and stuff were run. They were checked repeatedly to see if they had done something financially that would compromise their position within the government. Like all of these things, I know good and well none of that is going on right now.
No,
None of that is going on because these people do not know what they're doing. They do not know what they're
not at
doing,
all.
and they have fired all of the people, or the people have taken early retirements that would have known what they were doing, you know? And
Hmm.
again, part of that is, yes, and it shows. Part of that is we are deliberately putting people in place to sink the competency of the government, because that too is it's weaponized incompetence, but it's also sabotaging our national security from the inside.
Mhm.
It's insidious. And I don't think people understand how insidious that is, that the so called leader of your country would then hire the most incompetent people to run every part of government so that it will fail. It's intentionally sinking government operations intentionally. They want it to fail while at the
Mhm.
same time singing God Bless America. That's diabolical. Now you know that is diabolical. And even if you are a so-called pseudo supremacist, you should be angry. Forget what you think about black people right now. Just hold that thought. You should be angry that your so-called government that you love is putting in incompetent people to think the country that you say you love. As
Mhm.
Umar would say, you don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious that the person who is saying we're going to put America first is making sure that administratively, functionally, America will be last for generations?
Mhm.
You don't find that suspicious? Forget how much you dislike black people. Let's hold that thought, right? If you just go on what they are doing to the country, you would know these people are not for you. They do not like you either. They will use you as a mechanism
Mhm.
to come against black and brown people. But the reality is they don't like you either. You are cannon fodder to their plans. You are cannon fodder.
Mhm.
Leslie says that's a mechanism for his will to never be questioned. Yeah, their hate of others is stronger. And in your hate of others, you're not paying attention to the fact that they're literally pulling the screws out of the entire country while they have your head turned over here to hate black
Mhm.
people, to hate women, to hate the stranger, to hate LGBTQIA, while they got you on a trans campaign, they're literally unscrewing all of the things that make America America. They are blaming what they perceive as competition for what the billionaires are doing to them, the white billionaires.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it is astounding to watch. Absolutely. Absolutely. And um I'm gonna fold in one of the recent movies that's out here. The movie One Battle After Another. I tell people it's a terrible script. It's got a great cast, but it's got a terrible script. But the script is so terrible. It's terrible. But the point of the film is, if you are trying to get into the club, white man, if you're trying to get into that club of the billionaire club, they will use you for cannon fodder, and then they will dispose of you like trash when they're done. That is the ultimate premise of that film. That film wasn't about Tayana Taylor. She's in the film for about the first 20-25 minutes. But that film is anti-revolutionary, right? It's a film that's designed to say, don't get caught up with those revolutionary people. It's actually a subtle caution to say these revolutions aren't going to work. These revolutions aren't going to be successful. Don't really get caught up in thinking that you're a revolutionary, because it will not turn out well for you. That's what the movie is about. It's a signal to white people who have a revolutionary mind, who want to help poor and oppressed peoples and marginalized people. It's a signal to them, don't try this. Don't try this. If you try this, this is how your life is going to wind up. It's going to be one battle after another. and it's going to be one unsuccessful battle after another. You're going to wind up poor. You're going to wind up living off the grid. You're going to wind up, addicted to substances. and
Well,
and
see here,
and forbid you mess around and have a child with one of these revolutionaries, because now you're gonna have a biracial child that you're gonna be struggling to take care of. Like, those messages are folded into that movie. But
hmm
the true message is that there was a pseudo supremacist, a poor man, a military man, and he wanted to get into the upper echelon of pseudo supremacy. And it was a table of billionaires. And that table of billionaires asked him, "Is there anything we should know before we let you in this group? Have you ever been with a black person? Do you have any black kids?" And that man sat up there and lied at that table. And they gave him the desserts for lying to them at the end of that film. And that's why I say the most brilliant part of that film was literally the last 10 minutes of that film, because it showed you that no matter how desperate you are to work to fit into the system of pseudo supremacy, it was never built for you. It was built for land owning, wealthy white men. And if you don't fit that, they will use you, but they will discard you at the end. I don't know how many
hmm
people got that message, but that's the message I got. The message I got was, what kind of white person are you? Because in their mind,
hmm
if you're not white and wealthy and land owning and elite, you're still not white enough. No matter how dedicated you are to the system of pseudo supremacy.
hmm And,
Yeah.
and see, here's the crazy part.
Oh, the name of the film is One Battle After Another. Oh, and people shorten it to OBAA, but it's One Battle After Another. Go ahead.
Here's the crazy thing. All those things that you named that would happen to people and they would lose, it's happening to them anyway.
Right.
So what do you have to lose? Be that revolutionary,
Mhm.
and you know what's happening to you. Be a revolutionary for change. You just might do better.
Yeah. But as I said, people have their opinions about the movie, but my thing is, the movie to me was not about Tayana Taylor's character at all. The movie was about a soldier who was willing to do whatever he could to get rid of his mistakes that he had made so that he could join this elite pseudo supremacist club, this secret club. And because he was unsuccessful in getting rid of his mistakes, and because he lied to them people, and they was ticked off that he lied, and then when he was unsuccessful in his mission, they brought him back in and questioned him again, and then he tried to lie about that. He was not pure. Say it again, Leslie. He was not pure enough for them. And that's what the white people who are around here gung ho about their whiteness need to understand. If you don't have the wealth, if you don't have the class, if you don't have the pedigree, you are still not white enough for them.
hmm
Which means when they say us, they're talking about the 0.01%. You're not included in that. And the sad part is, so many of them unfortunately have been duped into thinking that they are a part of the club. And I said, if there was any movie that I would tell pseudo supremacists to go see, it would be this one. because it was very blunt. It showed that white male of a lower class, military trained, you know, ready, just gung ho for the country, gung ho to serve whiteness, and the reward he received. Because I said, this man, he was dedicated to the whiteness. Yeah, he had made some mistakes in his past, but he was dedicated to the whiteness. They didn't care, okay? They did not care. And so I look at some of these cases right now of some of these pseudo supremacists, and you go behind the scenes, and they have a black partner, they have a mixed race partner, they have a partner that's an immigrant. We just found out what the ICE officer that unalived Renee Good, he has an immigrant wife. And so some people are confused by that. They're like, how can you have an immigrant wife and then go join a force where you are treating immigrants in this cruel, unconstitutional, a lot of times, way? How can you do that? And somebody said, because for them, it's not about love, it's about power.
Mhm.
It's about power. And many times they're pulling from immigrant societies or from other societies where their patriarchy flies, where those women might have less rights as women, where their traditions might say the man is in charge. So that's why they're pulling from those countries, because they feel like they're not going to talk back to me the way an American woman would. But surprise, surprise, some of those women are not as docile and submissive as you think.
Mhm.
Surprise, surprise. And so, yeah, it's that's what it is. As Dick Gregory would say, that's what it's about. That's what it's about.
Mhm.
Final thoughts, Pastor Ben.
I know we keep saying wake up,
Mm-hmm.
but get today's message was for black folk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, we talked about white folk. It was for them too, but we have black people that falls into that category too. They want to please whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
want to rise to that upper echelons, not knowing that your color disqualifies you from the jump.
Mm-hmm.
But they will use you.
And someone called that an honorary whiteness, meaning they will lend you the trappings of whiteness as long as you are submitted to the cause of pseudo supremacy. And that's where we say, well, there are some white people, some black people who can be white supremacists, meaning that they see white still as the top. They see it as the end all
Hmm.
be all. They are willing to submit to it. But in the mind of true white supremacists, you still will never be white, no matter how much you want to
Hmm.
pledge your allegiance to it. Hello, Candace Owens.
Hmm.
You
Myron
will you
Donalds.
will still never be white in the truest sense for them. Um, and that's interesting too. But we'll have to talk about that another time. I don't want to get too much into her. But it's fawning when I see people running to defend what should not be defended. It's fawning. What is fawning? Fawning is a psychological
Hmm.
term that when people know and see that they are in danger, one of the things that they sometimes try to do is cozy up to the person doing the harm, or cozy up to their oppressor, in the hopes that maybe if I cozy up to them, they won't harm me specifically. But the reality is, the harm will eventually come. Leslie, I love your podcast. Thank you for persisting with your message. I am trying to persist. All I can do is teach and warn. That's all I can do. Female misogyny. Yes. Hmm. Yep. Um, we have to reject, raise better people to go out into the world. Children who won't tolerate mistreatment of anyone. And I think that even in all of this that is happening, I see the hope of our next generation. There are
Mhm.
teenagers who are turning in their own parents for being a part of ICE. That's happening. There are school children in Minnesota. All of them left school to go protest. They marched down, I think it was in St. Paul. They marched down to the Capitol in St. Paul to protest ICE. What you gonna do? Arrest all the children? Now you start arresting children on American streets, you gonna have a problem. You start slinging kids down in the streets and stepping on their necks, you're gonna have a problem. They don't want that. My Gen Z kid left this podunk town and helped elect Mundani. Awesome. So our message today is pay attention. Think about where we are in this nation right now as we're heading into this 250th year anniversary. What to the black person is independence? What to the American is independence? What is our independence going to look like in the next few months? Are we going to continue to have a Supreme Court that ultimately has given this man a blank check to do what he wills to the American people? And is anybody going to step up and stop it? If we see that the Supreme Court is in collusion with the kind of crime he's doing against citizens, why isn't anybody filing anything against the Supreme Court? Because they can. I looked it up. The Supreme Court can
Mhm.
be brought up on charges
Mhm.
when you are helping a criminal take down the country. Why isn't anybody filing anything against these judges that are ruling unconstitutionally against the American people? I got questions. There are checks and balances and things in place. The country's just not checking nothing and balancing nothing. That's why we're overdrawn right now. So, thank you for sharing in this time with us. We're going to continue to keep our eyes on what's happening. If you want to follow us online at Facebook, we are Black Table Talk. We posted some things last night to kind of give people some heads up about things that are happening in Minnesota, things that are happening with voting. There's so much happening on several different fronts, and so we're trying to stay updated and stay ahead of that news. If you were like me and your phone was off yesterday because of the outages and down, uh, the phone services being down, you might want to consider getting you a set of walkie talkies. Some people say satellite phone as well, because we need to start thinking about what will happen, not if, but when our internet is turned off in this country. Because, like some of the other countries right now, people are trying to hide things that they're doing to the citizens. So we got to think about that. Are we prepared for that? And if we're not, let's do the things we need to do in order to get prepared. All right. If you feel like this broadcast is too heavy to share online, share it by text. Copy the link. This will process um, by tomorrow. Copy the link. Share it by text. Share it by Facebook Messenger. Um, we know that sometimes you don't want certain attention drawn to you based on what we're covering. We get that. But we encourage you to share what you can with who you can. Share with people who have questions about what's happening right now in the United States. All right. I want to thank you all for your time and your attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to evil. So go out and be what?
Light.
Light. Take care, everyone. Be well, and most importantly, be light. We will be back on the last week in January, the last Monday in January.